In this week's edition, the two processing worlds of the 482 visa. Dutton promises to change the Migration Act if he's elected. The Western Australian invitation round. A drop in international student spending hits Australian exports. Backpackers flooding into this country unchecked will displace international students. And temporary residents to be shut out from buying Australian homes. Hi, I'm Karl Konrad and welcome to this week's edition of Australian Immigration News, proudly brought to you by Australian Immigration Law Services, a company I founded in Sydney more than 26 years ago. This is the only channel that brings more than a quarter of a century of professional practice experience to your screen. Currently, there are two processing worlds for the 482 visa. The new skills in demand version, the 482, is being processed at lightning speed, and the legacy TSS 482 visa is being processed at a snail's pace. The Migration Institute of Australia has approached the government multiple times regarding the disparity in processing times between the new SID 482 visa applications and the older TSS 482 visa applications. Each time the response came back is they were aware of the situation and nothing more. Many applicants from the previous cohort have been waiting over 6 months for their visas to be processed, while the new SID 482 visa applicants are receiving approvals in a matter of days. Recently, we experienced where new SID nominations were approved within just 5 seconds. This has led to speculation that an AI program might be handling assessments, or perhaps the department systems have been set on auto-grant applications. Remember, there is little difference between the old 482 visa program and this new SID version of the 482 visa regarding the complexity of the regulations. There is a palpable sense of frustration amongst lawyers and migration agents over the perceived unfairness in processing arrangements. Even though the Immigration Department has acknowledged the issue, it has not provided any solutions to address the disparity. Clearly, the department is eager to showcase these rapid processing times as evidence of a successful reform before the election, but this is a hollow gesture when it comes at the expense of countless applicants who are left waiting for months. This week in a Sky News interview, Peter Dutton committed to reforming the Section 501 of the Migration Act to stamp out hate crimes in Australia if he is elected as Prime Minister in the next election.
Do you think the Migration Act should be amended so that anti-Semitic conduct is grounds to refuse a new visa?
Yes, without question. We've announced that we'll tighten up Section 501. I want to send a very clear message to people who hate us, hate our country, hate Jewish people, hate other segments of our society, that under a government that I lead, they'll have no place in this country.
Section 501 of the Migration Act contains specific provisions that allow for the cancellations of a person's visa, including permanent resident visas, or to refuse visa applications if the individual fails a particular character test. Over the years, these powers have been expanded to encompass a range of crimes, including domestic violence. It is highly likely that, regardless the outcome of the next election, hate crimes will be added to these list of offences. These are difficult times for the country, and it is likely we will see a range of things change in relation to the Migration Act in the next 12 months. On the 19th of February, the Western Australian Government conducted another state sponsorship invitation round for the 491 and 190 visas. It was surprising to see there were no invitations for the 491 visa issued to students who study in WA, either in higher educational or vocational education streams, but rather 583 were issued for the 190 visa. You can find a more detailed report on the points needed for each occupation and when their EOI was originally submitted. So far then, for this financial year, they have issued 8,673 invitations, but that does not mean all who were invited actually applied. I'm sure we'll see another invitation round before the end of this financial year, but it probably won't take long before WA closes its doors. On this channel, we do not often discuss the Reserve Bank of Australia's monetary policy statements, but this week brought a significant news worth highlighting. The Reserve Bank has cited tightening student visa requirements as a key factor contributing to the weaker than expected export growth figures. In their media release dated the 18th of February, they stated education exports were weaker than expected due to a tightening in student visa requirements and the unexpected decline in the average expenditure of international students. This insight from the Reserve Bank underscores the importance of international students to the Australian economy and raises concerns about the implications of stringent visa regulations. However, I don't agree with this part. With the unexpected decline in the average expenditure of international students. Actually, it was not unexpected at all. If you mistreat international students, as has been the case on numerous fronts over the past couple of years, you cannot expect them to spend freely. They are understandably reserved and cautious, especially considering that the government has shown a willingness to break their promises, particularly regarding enticing students into specific courses with the assurance of a longer 485 visa. Additionally, thousands of international students have been denied access to their working graduate visa that they were promised simply because they reached the age of 36. And if that wasn't enough, international students in general have also been unjustly blamed for contributing to the housing crisis in Australia. This situation clearly illustrates the critical importance of the international student sector to Australia's economy, yet the Labor Party continues to undermine this industry at every opportunity. The Australian newspaper this week came out with a hard-hitting story that backpackers who are not coming to work in regional areas should not be displacing international students. The headline reads, "Backpackers flood in under Labor migration crackdown." About 1/4 of this record level of backpackers in Australia consists of British nationals who recently obtained an exemption of having to complete regional farm work to extend their working holiday visa and now can stay in Australia for up to 3 years. In the article, Phil Honeywood, the Chief Executive Officer of International Education Association of Australia, is quoted, "We are now welcoming unlimited working holiday visa holders. These backpackers also require reasonable accommodation. They are not contributing a single dollar to the Australian education providers for any qualification. Our nation seems to have the wrong priority in preferencing young British people over others. As far as we're concerned, Australia needs backpackers and international students together as a team to assist the Australian economy. One should not be displaced at the expense of the other." And the politics of targeting temporary residents in Australia continues. Starting April 1st, nearly every temporary resident holder in Australia will be banned from owning existing homes. Currently, a temporary resident or their spouse who intends to use the dwelling as their place of residence while in Australia can apply for approval to purchase existing homes. However, this will no longer be the case after the 1st of April for a period of 2 years. It remains uncertain whether the holders of the 491 and 494 visas can obtain an exemption from this restriction. This move was immediately labelled as a political stunt.
And it only relates to about 0.38% of the market, so it's clearly a political decision, isn't it?
Well, let me take you through what the policy is all about, Andrew. Today, the government's announcing that we are going to ban foreign ownership of existing property in Australia.
This announcement served as an attempt to distract from the government's failure to meet the proposed housing construction targets and to make any significant changes to the way Australia's migration systems work, as we still have the considerable delays in processing PR visas as when Labor first took office. Realising that the so-called broken migration system has hardly been touched, the former Department of Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill's usual broken system record speech has now been modified to only partially broken.
What I would say is that we arrived in office to find a migration system that was fundamentally broken, taking the necessary measures to bring migration back to normal and, in addition, fix the systems aspects of it that are broken.
Of course, in reality, none of it is broken, just underfunded and understaffed as always, which just gives the appearance of a worn-out system. And to throw us further off the scent of mismanagement, Peter Dutton is portrayed as the worst alternative.
I want people to remember that while Peter Dutton was Home Affairs Minister, he actually issued more visas in a single year than any other politician in Australian history, 10 million visas in 1 year.
And yes, we do remember he wasn't perfect by any means, but at least his government wasn't deceitful and unjust to international students. Now it's time for one of our readers' comments. In the next few weeks, we shall cover a number of the 186 visa questions, so stay tuned in for those. Mansour writes in and asks, the 2 years eligibility time for the 186 TRT can be counted from the full-time work started date with the employer or from the date the visa is granted. Mansour, let's say you began working for your employer while holding the 485 graduate visa or perhaps a working holiday visa, and then the 482 visa application was lodged. Unfortunately, the time spent working and waiting for the 482 visa cannot be counted. The 2 years will begin once the 482 visa is granted. However, if you're working on a bridging visa between 482 visas, then this period of time can be counted. I hope that helps. Well, that's the end of another fascinating week in the world of Australia's immigration system. To make sure you don't miss out on any of the juicy bits of information, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Remember, we are always here to lend a helping hand. You can book a consultation online, or if you're in a hurry, just pick up the phone. As always, take care out there, and I will see you next time. So bye for now.